Concludes the member questioning. Representative Nunes, you're recognized for any concluding remarks.
Well, Act 1 of today's circus is over. For those of you who have been watching it at home, the Democrats are no closer to impeachment than where they were 3 years ago. In the process, the Department of Justice, FBI, State Department, elements within the IC, the ICIG, have all suffered long-term damage. The Democrats can continue to poison the American people with this nonsense. We sat here all morning without any evidence for impeachment, which would be a very serious crime, high crime and misdemeanors, as it says in the Constitution. No such thing. Policy disagreements and the Democrats' failure to acknowledge their involvement in the 2016 election, I would say it's astonishing, but that would be putting too little emphasis on their actions. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. I want to thank our witnesses today, Ms. Williams, Colonel Vindman, both of you for your service to the country, for your testimony here today. And I just want to address briefly some of the evidence you presented, as well as others thus far in the impeachment inquiry. First of all, I want to join my colleagues in thanking you, Colonel Vindman, for your military service. And I should tell you that notwithstanding all of the questions you got on why didn't you go talk to your supervisor, why didn't you go talk to Mr. Morrison, why did you go to the national security lawyer, as if there's something wrong with going to the national security lawyer. Are you aware that we asked Mr. Morrison whether he went to the national security lawyer right after the call, and that he did?
I am.
And are you aware also that we asked him, well, if you had this problem with Colonel Vindman not going to you instead of the lawyer, naturally you must have gone to your supervisor, and you know what his answer was? He didn't go to his supervisor either. He went directly to the National Security Council lawyer. So I hope my colleagues will give him the same hard time for not following his chain of command that he complained about with you, apparently. The president may attack you, and has. Others on right-wing TV might attack you, and they have. But I thought you should know, and maybe you know already, that this is what the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had to say about you, Colonel Vindman. He is a professional, competent, patriotic, and loyal officer. He has made an extraordinary contribution to the security of our nation in both peacetime and combat. I'm sure your dad is proud to hear that. My colleagues have tried to make the argument here today, and we've heard it before, that the president was just interested in fighting corruption. That's our goal, fighting corruption in Ukraine, this terribly corrupt country. The problem, of course, with that is there's no evidence of the president trying to fight corruption. The evidence all points in the other direction. The evidence points in the direction of the president inviting Ukraine to engage in the corrupt act of investigating a U.S. political opponent. Ambassador Yovanovitch was known as a strong fighter of corruption. So what does the president do? He recalls her from her post. Ambassador Yovanovitch, in fact, was at a meeting celebrating other anti-corruption fighters, including a woman who had acid thrown in her face on the day she was told to get on the next plane back to Washington. You prepared talking points for the president's first conversation with Zelensky. He's supposed to talk about rooting out corruption. If this president had such a deep interest in rooting out corruption in Ukraine, surely he would have brought it up on the call, but of course we now know that he did not. We then see Rudy Giuliani not fighting corruption, but asking for an investigation of the Bidens. And my colleagues say, well, maybe he was acting on his own. Even though he says he's acting as the president's lawyer, maybe he was really acting on his own. But the two investigations that Rudy Giuliani wanted come up in the meeting you participate in on July 10th at the White House, when Ambassador Sondland brings up the Bidens and Burisma in 2016, tells the Ukrainians who want that meeting in the White House, you got to do these investigations. Now they would say Ambassador Sondland was acting on his own, but that doesn't quite work either, because we have the call record from July 25th, which the president was forced to release, in which the president doesn't bring up corruption. He doesn't say how those anti-corruption courts going or great work in the RADA. Of course not. What does the president say? I want you to investigate the Bidens and this debunk conspiracy theory pushed by Vladimir Putin. That also helps me in my reelection. So much for fighting corruption. The message to Ukraine, the real message to Ukraine, our U.S. policy message is, don't engage in political investigations. The message from the president, however, was the exact opposite. Do engage in political investigations and do it for my reelection. And it's also made clear if they want the White House meeting and ultimately if they want $400 million in U.S. aid, this is what they have to do. The only lament I hear from my colleagues is it wasn't successful. They got caught. They didn't get the political investigations and they still had to release the money. Now, they still haven't gotten the White House meeting, but they had to release the money because a whistleblower blew the whistle. Whistleblower the president wants to punish. And because Congress announced it was doing investigations and very soon thereafter, the president was forced to lift the hold on the aid. They argue, well, this makes it okay that it was a failed effort to bribe Ukraine, a failed effort to extort Ukraine. That doesn't make it better. It's no less odious because it was discovered and it was stopped. And we have courageous people like yourself who come forward, who report things, who do what they should do, who have a sense, as you put it, Colonel, of duty. Of duty. Not to the person of the president, but to the presidency and to the country. And we thank you for that. At the end of the day, I think this all comes back to something we heard from another career Foreign Service officer just last Friday in a conversation he overheard with the president in a restaurant in Ukraine, in which the president, not Rudy Giuliani, not anyone else, the president of the United States wanted to know, are they going to do the investigations? This is the day after that July 25th call. Are they going to do the investigations? And he's assured by Ambassador Sondland they're going to do it. And what does Sondland relate to this Foreign Service officer after he hangs up that call? The president doesn't give an expletive about Ukraine. He only cares about the big things that help his personal interests. That's all you need to know. And it isn't just about Ukraine, of course. Ukraine is fighting our fight against the Russians, against their expansionism. That's our fight too. That's our fight too. At least we thought so on a bipartisan basis. That's our fight too. That's why we support Ukraine with the military aid that we have. Well, the president may not care about it, but we do. We care about our defense. We care about the defense of our allies. And we darn well care about our Constitution. We are adjourned. I please ask the audience to allow the witnesses and the members who have to go vote to leave first.
Well, this now concludes this session of the impeachment inquiry into US President Donald Trump. Two witnesses have been testifying here for the past few hours, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman and Jennifer Williams. Now, both were listening in on Donald Trump's phone call to Ukraine's president in July, which is at the heart of this inquiry. Both have testified that his request to Ukraine to investigate the Bidens was improper. Now, much of the questioning revolved around who the two witnesses may have spoken to, particularly Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who said that he'd spoken to someone in the intelligence community. Now, during the hearing, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff had to interrupt those questions to protect potentially the whistleblower's identity.
You're here to answer questions, and you're here under subpoena. So you can either answer the question or you can plead the fifth.
On behalf of my client, we are following the rule of the committee, the rule of the chair with regard to this issue, and this does not call for an answer that is invoking the fifth or any theoretical issue like that. We're following the ruling of the chair.
Counselor, what ruling is that?
If I could interject, counsel is correct. Whistleblower has the right, statutory right to anonymity. These proceedings will not be used to out the whistleblower.
Let's go now to Heidi Zhou-Castro, who's on Capitol Hill. And Heidi, there are three words that really leapt out during that testimony. One is improper, unusual, and political. Take us through it so far.
Right, and all of those adjectives you just said, Stan, were used by today's witnesses to describe their reaction to hearing the phone call in July when Trump asked the president of Ukraine to open investigations into Trump's political adversaries in the U.S. And today's two witnesses were both national security experts on Ukraine, and the narrative that they laid out is this. They said prior to that phone call, there was a meeting at the White House between Ukrainian and U.S. officials in which the Ukrainians were explicitly told that they had to provide this investigation or else their president, Volodymyr Zelensky, would not be invited to the White House, something that he deeply coveted. Then, of course, we have the phone call in itself, in which Zelensky, still at the time not knowing that there was also $400 million of security aid that was being withheld, he thanked Trump for helping Ukraine in its defense against Russia. And Trump responds asking for a favor, those investigations into Joe Biden and the Democrats. Then you fast forward a little over a month, when then it's explicitly communicated to Ukrainian aides that it's not only the White House meeting that is being leveraged for this investigation to the Bidens, but also that security aid. That ask made by Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU. These are things that the witnesses today testified to. And you can see that the president has denied that there was any sort of link between the security aid and the investigations, and Republicans, rather than focusing on evidence that would prove the president right in that, they're focusing attacks on the process, as you just heard, trying to discredit the whistleblower and attacking today's witnesses as well, saying they refuse to answer questions about the whistleblower's identity, when of course U.S. law protects that person's identity from being made open to the public.
Heidi, thank you. We're going to go to White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett, who's going to join us now. The Republicans on this committee, the attitude was really summed up by Devin Nunes, the ranking Republican at the end, where he said, Act 1 of today's circus is over. The strategy here, Kimberly, is to ridicule this. We've seen this from Donald Trump, attack the witnesses. Is it an effective strategy?
Well, they would argue that they're really, in essence, they have been relegated to this strategy because they make the argument that the Democrats who are in control of the House of Representatives have not permitted all of their witnesses, have not always permitted them to ask the line of questioning that you would typically see in a normal sort of due process trial. So that's the counter argument in all of this. And when you talk about the circus or the drama or the performance, well, all of these Republicans are performing for an audience of one. We do know the U.S. President, Donald Trump, despite saying in the past that he hasn't bothered to watch these hearings, this time came out forcefully saying he is watching very carefully. He did continue to attack the process as unfair, as his Republican congressman colleagues have done, as well as a female congresswoman. But he also believed that they were doing genuinely a good job.
You have a kangaroo court headed by little Shifty Schiff, where we don't have lawyers, we don't have witnesses, we don't have anything, and yet I just got to watch, and the Republicans are absolutely killing it. They are doing so well because it's a scam. It's a big scam. They're doing something that the founders never thought possible and the founders didn't want, and they're using this impeachment hoax for their own political gain.
And the argument that has been made is that what Democrats have been trying to do is undo the results of the 2016 U.S. election, that while this is the first impeachment inquiry, there have been votes in the past on the floor of the House of Representatives to impeach the president dating back to the very first years of his presidency. So now moving forward, the argument also is the impact this is having on the president's health. Not only is he undergoing this now impeachment inquiry, but prior to that, it was the probe into whether or not his 2016 campaign colluded with Russia under special counsel Robert Mueller. In fact, these concerns about the president's health, the impact on it, reached a bit of a crescendo over the weekend on Saturday when he went to the hospital, and this was not put on the public calendar for the president, speculating, in fact, that he may have had some chest pains, potentially a heart attack. Well, the U.S. president talked about that as well from inside the White House, once again discrediting the media as he has from the beginning, day one of his presidency, saying that the press is sick and dangerous, a corrupt media. I hope they get their act together, also assuring the public that he was completely fine.
Kimberly, thank you for that. Let's discuss this further now with Geoffrey Kabaservice, who is the Director of Political Studies at Niskannen Centre and author of Rule and Ruin, the Downfall of Moderation and Destruction of the Republican Party. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Nice to have you with us, sir. Both of these witnesses were in on the July telephone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Both of them raised concerns and took those concerns to a higher level. I want to get your assessment of what you heard today, the quality and the strength of their evidence and the credibility of the two witnesses.
I think both witnesses came across as credible. On the other hand, I'm not sure it matters in the broad political theater that has become the impeachment hearings. One of the phenomena about political life in the United States right now is that it has become intensely tribal. And if you are part of one tribe, you see almost anything the other side is doing as false and wrong and harmful to the country. And in that sense, it doesn't matter how credible the witnesses were. Republicans are bound and determined to see them as part of a deep state conspiracy against the president, and therefore they simply won't credit anything that they say.
And to that end, questions were directed specifically at them and their credibility. Both were asked if they were never Trumpers, and particularly Lieutenant Colonel Vindman questioned about his links to Ukraine, about a job offer to become defence minister in Ukraine, questions about whether he had leaked information, all of this trying to discredit him. To what extent is that an effective strategy in terms of playing to that hardcore Republican base who see this as a Democratic conspiracy?
I think it probably is effective on the part of Republicans to paint these witnesses as part of a deep state plot. And I think that they would be blamed by not only the president, but by the base if they didn't put up a kind of ferocious argument against the entire proceedings. However, there's a bigger question as to how this will play out politically in the long run, whether in fact attacking immigrants, whether attacking naturalized citizens of foreign backgrounds, whether attacking people who have fought and bled in the service of their country in the United States military will backfire on the Republicans politically.
There was something else that was raised today, and that is the allegations that are at the heart of this, the allegations against Joe Biden's son Hunter and his connections to the energy company in Ukraine, which really so much of this revolves around. Both of the witnesses said that there is potentially an appearance here of a conflict of interest, and questions were raised again about whether Hunter Biden should actually be forced to testify here. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, I think there's no doubt that it looks bad to a large segment of the American people when the offspring of prominent politicians get a cushy job for which they are evidently qualified. And these suspicions are raised manifold when it's a job with a foreign company, particularly in a state known for corruption like Ukraine. On the other hand, there have been no independently verified allegations that Hunter Biden did anything wrong, that he broke any laws whatsoever, whether of the United States or of the Ukraine, or that Joe Biden has had any kind of untoward action with regard to either Burisma, the company that employed his son, or the Ukrainian government. So I think the attempt on the part of the Republicans here is to create the appearance that where there's smoke, there must be fire. If this looks a little bad, if this looks maybe a little unethical, it probably was even unlawful.
Geoffrey Kabaservice, appreciate you joining us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.